Thank you so much for coming and talking with me. I know this is a difficult conversation to have, but it's going to help you move forward, so I'll let you go ahead and take the floor. Come on, can you please talk to me? We're not going to get anywhere without a back and forth here, so please, just tell me, where did the bad man touch you? This is worse than I thought. You ever play the Game Boy Advance and just think to yourself, man, these games are great, but I wish I could just tap the screen to control things that could be done way easier with buttons. Oh, hell yeah! Nintendo has a strong history of handheld consoles, starting with the original Game Boy and coming all the way to the Switch or 3DS, depending on how much you consider the Switch a handheld. The Switch Lite, however? Oh yeah, that's definitely a handheld, no question, because no matter how hard I try, I can't play it on my TV. Nintendo has always made home consoles, but it's fallen behind its competition a bit in terms of power and sales. But when it comes to handhelds, it's not even a contest. 5 of the top 12 highest selling consoles of all time are Nintendo handhelds, plus the Switch, and when the only other handheld to crack the top 12 is the PSP at 11, I think Nintendo is doing alright. Plus, just look at the total sales for just handhelds. At least Atari tried. Handhelds are much different from home consoles and can have very different games on them. They just aren't able to cram as much power into the smaller consoles, but that's pretty obvious. Would you believe me if I told you this was less powerful than this? No shit. Throughout my life, the only handheld consoles I've ever owned are the Game Boy Color, which I broke as a kid so I no longer have, the Game Boy Advance, DS, and 3DS. All of these consoles are very solid and have things that set them apart. The Game Boy Color added color to games, the 3DS used 3D to create new unique adventures, and the GBA had the worst fucking screen imaginable. But of all of these, which one did I play the most during my childhood? The one that could play all of these. I've said this before, but I mainly used my handhelds for Pokemon as a kid. Sure, I own other games here and there, but not too many. And the one console that came out when I was 7 years old and could also play all of the games from my childhood is of course the one that holds the nearest and dearest place in my heart. Today, we're taking a look at the Nintendo DS. Development for the DS began in 2002 with the announcement of it being in development not until 2003. Nintendo repeatedly stated that the new console was not going to be a successor to the Game Boy Advance, but instead that the two could coexist by having different games and experiences, even though the DS was backwards compatible with the GBA, basically implying, yeah, this is the successor. Although my personal belief is that a big part in keeping the GBA slot was that so if the DS didn't catch on, they could just market it as an enhanced Game Boy with some touchscreen features. Because we all know what everyone's biggest issue with the GBA was. You know what this is missing? The console's name, DS, was officially announced in January 2004 with the prototype being shown at that year's E3. This was our first look at this two-screen block that Nintendo's entire future depended on. That's not even a joke. Because of the GameCube not reaching the sales Nintendo wanted, the former president Hiroshi Yamauchi stated, "If the DS succeeds, we will rise to heaven, but if it fails, we will sink to hell." Oh man, this is the company that made Hotel Mario. We can't let them fail! A lot was riding on this little guy, but it must have done alright. I mean, Nintendo was still around to this day, so I'm sure it ended up selling well. I think it's safe to say the DS took Nintendo to heaven. The DS was officially released on November 21st, 2004 in North America, with a release in Japan on December 2nd, and then Europe and Australia in early 2005. The system was met with almost universal praise and was in incredible demand throughout its entire life, but especially at its launch. Over 500,000 consoles were sold in the first week in the United States alone, and by the end of the year, worldwide sales had reached nearly 3 million. Every console launch needs a big system-selling game to convince consumers to buy it. Nintendo doesn't always hit the mark with these launch titles, but when they do, they really do and have some of the best games on the system. The Wii had Wii Sports, the Switch had Breath of the Wild, and the Nintendo 64 had Super Mario 64. So what did the DS have? This really would have sucked without Super Mario 64 DS. Nintendo wanted to prove they could make 3D games for a handheld console, and what better way to do that than to remake one of the most revolutionary and beloved 3D games in history? God, I wish! Super Mario 64 DS was the perfect game to launch this system with. One of the DS's biggest features was the power to house 3D games on a handheld console, something that really hadn't been done before. Let me rephrase, something that hadn't really been done well before. Super Mario 64 was a revolutionary 3D game that moved gaming forward, so Nintendo used its popularity and name to continue that surge. Now, was the game actually as revolutionary as the original? Hell no! I have a whole video talking about why it's both one of the best and worst remakes out there, so if you want an in-depth look at this game, I recommend checking that out. I'll just go over the main points for why this was such a good launch title for the DS. Like I said, it showed off the power of the DS by running a Nintendo 64 game game on the go, which was super impressive at the time. And then it did the most important thing for any launch title. It took advantage of the console's gimmick without it feeling forced into the game with no real purpose. I mean, it did also force the gimmick in since you can control the game with the touchscreen, but only a psycho would ever do that. But what I am talking about are the mini games. These are so much fun, and all use the two screens and touchscreen specifically to make the experience unique and stand out over other consoles. They even reused them for New Super Mario Bros. Because they were that much fun. That's another game that really helped the DS. There hadn't been a true new 2D Mario game since Super Mario Land 2 in 1992. Clearly, Nintendo had shifted the focus over to 3D since that was the big new craze. But 2D games will always have a place, and New Super Mario Bros. Showed us why. It had everything we wanted. Just look at the title and it tells you everything. It's a new Super Mario Bros. Game. It's a perfect title because it tells you what to expect and gets you excited to play a classic experience on the go. But it did even more than that because it just wasn't a regular Super Mario Bros. Game ported onto the DS. They added so many new ideas that it was one of the most unique Mario games at the time. Oh, the irony. The game had the charm and feel of the old school games, but still new flair, which led to it being one of the greatest selling games of all time. Just look under your couch cushion. There's probably a copy sitting under there. Those two games were really two of the biggest that helped the DS succeed, but there was a third Mario game that helped complete this trifecta. We have a 3D game, we also have a 2D game, and then we have a game to end all friendships. Who doesn't love Mario Kart? Sure, sometimes it's absolute bullshit, but that's what makes it fun. All the random items, hectic moments, rubber banding from AIs, I wouldn't want Mario Kart any other way than constantly pissing me off. This was the first 3D handheld Mario Kart and arguably one of the best in the series. The 3D allowed for much cooler and unique track designs over Super Circuit, plus with the retro courses, this was the first time we got to play many of these tracks on the go. The racing and controls were surprisingly smooth considering you were using a D-pad to move. I always complain about 3D games using a D-pad, so that's pretty big praise from me. This game had so much to offer as well, with side modes in case you're lonely like me and have no friends. Time trials, battle mode with some of the best tracks ever, a DS as a stage, genius idea, just like the GameCube and Double Dash. There's nothing I want more than a Switch-themed stage in Mario Kart 9. And then the best single player in any Mario Kart with the mission mode. This was an incredible idea and gave the game so much more replay value. Why this never came back is beyond me, but hopefully Nintendo can eventually remember that they did this because I want a new mission mode. Another thing this game added was wireless multiplayer, which was the first of its kind for Mario Kart. You only even needed one copy of the game, and then you could download play onto another system. They get shamed and play as a Shy Guy for not owning the game, but hey, Shy Guy is cool, don't hate. I could go on about this game, but I may make a video on it someday, so I'll leave it at that for now. Just know it was amazing and deserves your respect. Another series that deserves your respect are the mainline Zelda games on the DS. Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks are direct successors to Wind Waker on the GameCube and keep many of the same themes and styles from that game. These two games are honestly two of the best Zelda games out there and rank pretty much equally with Wind Waker for me. Just imagine the vast sea and world of Wind Waker, but on a console that can fit in your pocket. Can't do that with Wind Waker. It's so impressive and allows for a unique experience unlike anything before it. Previous handheld Zelda games were still very good. Link's Awakening, the Oracle games, and Minish Cap definitely deserve to be played and don't get talked about enough. But these two are just even better for me. They still have the charm and characters from Wind Waker, which is one of the best parts. Plus a great world and dungeon design, engaging gameplay, and incredible music, which you all know is very important to me. Plus the games use the touchscreen to move and for items and puzzles. Sure, it definitely is kind of forced in some instances, but it still all works and controls very well. I personally think I prefer Spirit Tracks over Phantom Hourglass overall, but you can't go wrong with either. For a game revolving around a train in a series that normally uses a horse, gotta say it definitely surpassed my expectations. Pretty much every major Nintendo franchise got some sort of representation on the DS. Metroid had Metroid Prime Hunters, which is a very underrated game in my opinion. It's not as in-depth or even as good as the main Metroid Prime games, but it is definitely worthy of the Metroid Prime name. Not something we can say for every handheld Metroid game. Star Fox Command isn't the best Star Fox game, but it still has many of the aspects that makes the series well received. And it's still better than Star Fox Zero, but that's not saying much. Rhythm Heaven got its start here. Animal Crossing got a new game, which was basically just an improvement on the original, but still good. Mario and Luigi got new RPGs, which are some of the best RPGs out there, especially Partners in Time. And then how can we talk about a handheld without mentioning the biggest media franchise in the world, Pokemon? These didn't make use of the touchscreen too much, but they did make use of about 75% of my DS game library. Every one of these games is incredible. Diamond and Pearl were held back by slow gameplay, but Platinum made improvements to everything and is still one of the best games in the series. It's not the best in the series though, since those games came out one generation later with Black and White. These are by far the best games in the series. They have a lightning fast battle system, well-designed menus, the best story and most developed antagonists in the series, individually animated all 649 Pokemon sprites, had an incredible soundtrack, and yet people still complain about them because herder, Ice Cream Pokemon makes the game bad. Just shut up and admit you've never played the game because it's not even a competition. Even the sequels are just as good and should be praised just as highly. Oh yeah, and then they remade the first Pokemon games I ever played with Heart Gold and Soul Silver. This is the best collection of Pokemon games on one single console by a long shot, and in my personal opinion, the golden age of the series. The DS had one of the widest and largest game libraries for any console I can think of. I mean, you had games for all the casuals out there as well as for all the hardcore gamers. The DS was one of Nintendo's biggest successes to date and definitely helped keep them at the top of the gaming industry. It outsold the original Game Boy by over 30 million and even the Wii by 50 million. Now that is hard to do. Its wide range of games made it marketable to people of every background and of every age. There were games for kids with educational titles and just fun family-friendly experiences. Games for regular Nintendo fans who like their mainline series, games for the teenagers who swear more than they should with the Call of Duty games, and even games for adults and parents who have a life with simple puzzle and instructional games. Brain Age was a great idea and it was a big seller for consumers who were a little bit older. And then there's makeup tutorials, cookbooks, and freaking Nintendogs. There's something for everyone. Not only did the DS help Nintendo from falling behind both PlayStation and Xbox, it helped keep them in a distant first when it came to handhelds. Plus it helped create an entirely new line of systems with the 3DS, which was essentially just an improved DS. But hey, that's exactly what everyone wanted. Was the DS perfect? No. But did it change Nintendo and help them reach the heights they are at today? Absolutely! The success of their handhelds pushed Nintendo to combine both their home consoles and handhelds, which led to the current Nintendo Switch. Just think, if Nintendo didn't make this, where would they be today? I don't even want to think about it. The DS was good, but where would I rank it among all the Nintendo consoles? I've got this list here that I'm trying to complete, and I think I know where I'm going to put DS. I think I'm going to slide it in right here. Third place, which isn't too bad, but I think we gotta move on to the next console here too, so where should I put the Virtual Boy? This is gonna be a tough one. Give me a second here. I think I know where I'm gonna go with this one, alright? Perfect.